Good morning and welcome to the Planning and Placemaking Committee of the 11th of December 2024. I'm Councillor Ian Massey. I'm the convener of the Planning and Placemaking Committee. I'll now introduce you to the top table today. On my far left is Councillor Grant Stewart, the Vice Convener, and sitting next to him is Miss Audrey Brown, Democratic Support Officer, and a special welcome to Audrey. This is her first time at the Planning and Placemaking Committee. Next to her is Mr. Colin Elliott, Solicitor, and on my right is Mr. Christian Smith, Democratic Development Management and Building Standards Service Manager. Online is Mr. Paul Williamson, Team Leader Local Developments, and Sean Panton, Team Leader Major Developments. And as this is a hybrid meeting, members joining virtually are reminded that if you leave the meeting during consideration of any applications, you are unable to participate or vote on that item when you return to the meeting. This also means that if a member loses their internet connection during consideration of an item, they should not vote on that item. Please advise the clerk via the meeting chat that you are leaving the meeting, or if you have lost your connection and are therefore unable to vote on the item. And whilst we are operating as a hybrid meeting today, for the proceedings, can I remind councillors and officers to use the chat box to attract my attention, which all members should have access to. Q for questions, C for comment. I will now ask the clerk to confirm any apologies and attendance of those in the chambers and online.
Morning, Convener, thank you. We have apologies from Councillor Waters with Councillor McPherson substituting. He's in the chambers today, and I believe we have Councillor James online. If he could let us know that he's here.
Good morning, Audrey. Yep, I'm here, thank you.
Thank you. And I believe we've also got Councillor Harvey online.
Yeah, I thought you'd forgotten about me. Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Does any member have a declaration of interest? Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. Item 511, which is the matter regarding Bulgaria, given previous comments at a previous meeting in September, and also my involvement with residents, I am going to recuse myself and declare a non-financial interest in this matter.
Thank you, Councillor Braun. And move on to item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting of the Planning and Placemaking Committee of the 13th of November 2024. Can we agree the content of the minute? Agree. Thank you. Item 4, deputations. Can I ask the committee if they agree to hear deputations on items 511, 512, 513, 522, 523, 524 and 525. Okay, thank you. Yes.
Could you confirm just how long people are going to be given to speak today?
I was just about to go to Councillor Cuthbert. Yes. Understanding Orders Appendix 2 Protocol for Deputations Point 6. I have made the decision that due to the volume of business on today's agenda and the volume of deputations requests, individual deputations will be permitted to speak for 3 minutes, with deputations forming more than one person for 6 minutes. And on behalf of the committee, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the deputations and members of the public watching today. Your request to speak has been granted. You will be called to the lectern as we reach the relevant item on the agenda and be invited to make your deputation by the Vice Convener, followed by a period of time for questions from members. It is requested that the content of your deputation is kept relevant to the planning considerations in relation to the item of business being discussed, and please also ensure that when answering questions, your response remains relevant and direct to the questions asked. Item 5, applications for determination. Councillor Braun.
I'm going to believe I've logged out already. If somebody calls me back in, I'll be in the Chambers meeting room.
We will. Thank you. Thank you. Item 5, major applications. This is for the erection of 152 dwelling houses and associated works. Approval of matters. Councillor Cuthbert, you have a point of order.
Thank you, convener. Yes, I have visited the site, and my view is that we should be deferring this paper to the January meeting to allow members to carry out unaccompanied site visits to the site. My particular issue lies with the houses at the southern edge of the development site and the existing properties, which are, as far as I can see, all bungalows sitting on a slightly elevated position. So I think it's quite important that members see that to get a feel for just what's being proposed in this plan. I would also suggest or recommend that members go and visit Lathrow Farm in Kinross to get a feel for how the development will look once constructed, as it's got a similar density and is a similar style, if you like. I don't know if I've got a seconder, but that's my proposal.
Can I just clarify that you're having a procedural motion 17 proposing that an item be deferred to a later date?
I have no idea, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. Perhaps Mr. Elliott can confirm that.
Can I ask if there's a seconder for the motion? No seconder, then motion falls. Moving on. So, this is for the erection of 152 dwelling houses and associated works. Approval of matters specified in conditions 17.00939 IPM at land 200 metres west of Blairgowrie and Rattery Cottage Hospital, Perth Road, Blairgowrie. And to introduce the report is Mr. Panton.
Thank you, convener, and good morning to you all. As stated, the first item on the agenda today is for the erection of 152 dwelling houses for Persimmon Homes in Blairgowrie. The site is allocated in the Perth and Kinross Local Development Plan 2 and also benefits from planning permission in principle. The application before you today is an approval of matters for the planning permission in principle, and we are recommending approval. I'll now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposal further. On the screen here, you can see the location of the site. The site is on the western edge of Blairgowrie, just north of the A923 Dunkeld Road. The site is approximately 6.5 hectares and is bound to the north and west by existing mature trees and to the south and east by existing residential properties. Next slide, please. This is now an extract of the Perth and Kinross Local Development Plan 2 adopted in 2019, showing the site under question, denoted by the orange arrow. As seen, the site is allocated as part of the wider MU5 designation. Next slide, please. This plan now shows the extent of the planning permission in principle for a mixed-use development that was granted. The application before you today constitutes a northern section of the site north of Dunkeld Road. Members should also note that the recently constructed Lidl, Home Bargain and Starbucks development forms the immediate southern section of this allocation. Next slide, please. Here we have the proposed site plan. Members should note that when this application was initially submitted to us, it was for 171 dwelling houses. Due to concerns with overdevelopment, the case officer negotiated a reduction to 152 dwelling houses. This scheme before you today is therefore for the revised application for 152 dwelling houses as opposed to 171. The density now equates to 23.3 dwellings per hectare, which now complies with the principles indicated in the master plan. Next slide, please. We now have a typical elevation plan showing the 3-bedroomed Ardbeg house type. The proposal provides a mix of 2, 3, 4 and 5-bedroomed units addressing the needs of a range of households. All of the houses will have private garden areas and in-curtilage parking, with the terraced housing having communal parking spaces. Boundary treatments comprise of timber fencing, masonry walls and a combination of both. Next slide, please. We now have a proposed landscaping plan. As seen, there is a central open space area in addition to a landscape buffer surrounding the site to the west, north and east. There is also an area of open space as you enter the development from the Dunkeld Road. I will now take members through a series of photographs taken from my recent site visit with the case officer. First image, please. This photograph shows the approximate location of the site access from the A923 Dunkeld Road. Next image, please. This next photograph shows the site when looking in a northwesterly direction from the Dunkeld Road. Members' attention is drawn towards the red dashed line, which is the location of the core path, which will be shown in the next image. We now have the aforementioned core path, which runs to the north of the site. The site is to the right of the path here. This path will not be compromised through the development, and footpath links are included in the design to allow future occupiers of the development to access this path easily. Next slide, please. This next photograph shows the site when looking in a southeasterly direction back towards Blairgowrie. As you can see, the site slopes from north down to the south. Next image, please. This image now shows the site when looking in the southwesterly direction. The Dunkeld Road is denoted by the yellow dashed line. The SUDS is located beyond the Dunkeld Road on the other side of the road, as this is where it has been demonstrated it will be the most effective for the drainage of the site. Next image, please. This penultimate photograph shows the site when viewed from Gallowbank Road, with the rear of the properties on Dunkeld Road visible. Final image, please. This final photograph shows the site when viewed from Gallowbank Road. There will be a footpath connection here to ensure the permeability to the development. Final slide, please. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes my presentation. I will leave members with the proposed site plan for reference.
Thank you, Mr. Panton. We do have deputations on this item, so I'll now hand over to the Vice Convener for the deputations procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Can I call in Mr. Huddleston, objector to the application? Good morning, Mr. Huddleston. You'll be aware that you've got 3 minutes for your deputation, and I'll give you a prompt after a couple of minutes or so. And I'll start the clock whenever you feel comfortable to start.
LDP2 states that our vision is of a Perth and Kinross which is attractive and which protects its assets. This development will reduce the attractiveness of this area and jeopardise the assets of Blairgowrie as a tourist destination and as a biodiversity town. This application contravenes LDP2 Policy 1A. It would not contribute positively to the quality of the surrounding built and natural environment. The design of the development does not respect the character of the place. 12 houses share a boundary with this site, a 2-storey house and 11 bungalows. Any new development should have no houses above 2 storeys and have around 90% bungalows, and yet the plans show 12 properties with above 2 storeys and no bungalows at all. The application contravenes LDP2 Policy 1B. It does not respect site topography and surrounding landmarks or views. A huge mass of houses towering up the slope would ruin the picturesque entranceway to Blairgowrie. Travellers would no longer see Newton Castle from the Dunkeld Road. Proposed new development houses don't complement or match surroundings for appearance, massing, material finish or colour. And Part E, 152 homes, resulting in around 300 vehicles accessing a single busy road, contravenes the requirements for safe, accessible places which are easily navigable. This site isn't even on a public transport route. All these combine to contravene NPF 4 policies 13A and B. This proposal fails Policy 25, Housing Mix. It does not properly address the range of housing needs. It doesn't provide an appropriate mix of housing types and sizes, nor meets the needs of smaller households, old people and those on low income. It contains no affordable housing. NPF Policy 4A states proposals which by virtue of type, location or scale have an unacceptable impact on the natural environment will not be supported. High density housing of this type has no place in Blairgowrie. Building materials, layout, house type and construction have not been selected to maximise the reduction of impact on the natural environment. Policy 14B highlights attention to detail of local architectural styles, allowing people to live, play and work in their own area and reducing car dependency. This proposal does the exact opposite of all of these. Policy 17A and Policy 29B both state proposals in rural areas will only be supported where the development is suitably scaled, sited and designed to be in keeping with the character of the area. The houses in this high density proposal have dimensions, layout and scale which don't match existing housing. Any application for more than 65 houses on this site should be rejected, and future applications should only be considered if the layout, size and style of those houses matches the surrounding areas and properly meets local housing needs.
Thank you, Mr. Huddleston. Are you willing to take questions from members? Right, if we give it a moment while the chat box is populated. Councillor Allen.
Mr. Huddleston, thanks for your deputation. In the report, it's suggesting 152 dwelling houses. In your deputation, you suggested 65. Why did you choose that number?
I chose that number because Blairgowrie as a whole has 7.7 houses per hectare. The immediate surroundings, using various methods of calculating it, 13 houses per hectare. So if you took the actual buildable area of this site, so we're quoting here 6.5 for the site, but the actual net building area is somewhere between 4.67 and 4.8 hectares. So to calculate what's a reasonable density for that, multiply your 4.8 by the 13 houses per hectare that's roundabout, comes in about the 60 mark. So I thought, well, you might argue maybe a few more houses because we're in need of houses. So about 65 houses.
Mr. Huddleston, there's no further questions. You're free to go. Can I call on Professor Kirkpatrick, objector to the application? I'm sure you heard what I said to Mr. Huddleston. I'll start the clock whenever you feel comfortable.
Good morning, convener and members. I'd like to expand further on the issue of density. I believe this is excessive and not in keeping with policies 1A and 1B, and significantly in excess of what would have been envisaged in the plan. Firstly, the report states that the capacity range for the MU5 site is between 179 and 280. However, section 58 refers to the applicant's 2017 master plan proposal of 400 dwellings, which the 2018 Planning in Principle decision notice explicitly did not approve. Using the rejected 400 dwellings figure to calculate a proposed density of 23 per hectare is inappropriate and misleads the assessment. Secondly, capacity ranges across all development sites throughout the plan are not arbitrary. Placemaking guidance explains how the calculation of density is explicitly linked to capacity range. I quote, "Density ranges were chosen based on the context of the site, the surrounding urban grain, and the impact that the site has on local infrastructure." MU5 is a 26-hectare site. Some 5 hectares has been allocated to the completed retail development, leaving some 21 hectares. Allowing for 280 dwellings and the allocated recreational land, this equates to 16 dwellings per hectare. This must have been broadly what was envisaged in LDP2. Thirdly, the report states that the application site is 6.5 hectares. However, this includes the area of land excluded above the 90-metre contour line and the Suds Ponds to the south. LDP states that density is assessed as net dwelling density, calculated by, I quote, "including only those site areas which will be developed for housing and directly associated uses." Thus, the actual developable area on which dwellings are proposed is approximately 4.8 hectares. The net dwelling density of 152 houses on this site thus equates to 32 dwellings per hectare. 32 is high density housing. Fourthly, this proposal is inconsistent with local context. Existing housing within 200 metres of the site averages 13 per hectare. and to our knowledge, there are no other major local recent developments that anywhere near approach this level of proposed density. We have figures to hand to demonstrate this. Finally, Policy 1D states that capacity ranges are indicative. Placemaking guidance explains that the term is used in the context of allowing for variation in density according to building type, such as detached houses versus flats. There surely must be some limit to which this adjective might be stretched. Comparable here to extending a 20-kilo airline luggage allowance, not to 23 kilos if you were lucky, but to 40 kilos. In conclusion, this density breaches policies 1A and 1B bracket C and exceeds the LDP2 defined capacity. This proposal is inconsistent. Convener members, I thank you for your attention.
Are you willing to take questions from members? Okay, if we give that moment for the chat box to populate. Councillor Cuthbert.
I think there should be at least one question. Could you repeat the density you think that they are going to be once they're built? What density did you get? You said high density. Was that? Could you repeat the figure you had as the density you think it's going to be on the site?
Equates to 32, which in Perth and Kinross LDP definitions is high density housing.
Professor Kirkpatrick, there's no further questions. You're free to go. Can I now call on Mr. Law, objector to the application? Again, you'll be aware you've got 3 minutes, Mr. Law, and I'll give you a wee prompt, about a minute to go in your own time.
Convener members, this community urges you to consider the following critical concerns regarding traffic and transportation for the MU5 site proposal. Significant local impact. The site lies near critical emergency services, ambulance and fire stations. Increased congestion risks delays for life-saving services. 120 community members unanimously raised concerns about increased traffic, congestion and road safety at a local consultation meeting. Flawed transport assessment. The developer's report relies on outdated TRICS data from major English cities, failing to reflect rural Scotland's reality. It claims no increase in peak traffic, which is not credible considering 152 houses would add approximately 250 vehicles using the Scottish average of 1.5 cars per household. Contradictory evidence. Data from Scotland shows private car ownership rising above 3 million, with 70% of households owning at least one car. The trend is ignored in the application despite its material significance. National Planning Framework 4 controversies. Policy 13, sustainable transport, mandates developments reduce car dependency. Instead, this project will exacerbate car resilience and worsen congestion in our 19th century road system. Policy 14, design quality and place requires consideration of local infrastructure's capacity to handle increased demand, which this proposal fails to address. So if you know the area, Shaw Street is 300 yards long. There's parking each side. That is to get the only way to come from Dunkeld Road onto the Perth Road, and the serious congestion. Children going to school. Like I say, the children's playground is on West Shaw Street. You've got the fire station. So there's major congestion. So the projected traffic generation and flawed data in this proposal made the impact on our rural town unsustainable and unsafe. This must be treated as a material consideration to reject the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Law. Are you willing to take questions from members? Okay. We'll give a moment for the chat box to be populated. Mr. Law, there appears to be no questions. You're free to go. Can I call on Mr. Richardson, objector? Mr. Richardson, the usual routine, 3 minutes. I'll start the clock when you're ready, and I'll give you a prompt with a minute to go.
Hello, conveners and members. The Gallowbank proposal challenges Policy 22A, development of proposal at risk of flooding or in the flood risk area will only be supported if they are for I, essential infrastructure where the location is required for operational reasons, and C, property development proposals will not increase the risk of surface water flooding or itself be at risk. The super flooding flooding map shows 10% flooding every year where properties will be built. I'm speaking on behalf of the resilience part of the Community Council. With existing flooding in Rattray, residents are quick to access the sandbags pumps to protect their own property. Following any risk of flooding, sandbags are left around the property, which is unsightly and can remain in situ for many months. This is not the appearance of a new development. Resilience funding received since August 2022 is over £21,400 to deal mainly with resilience. This is mainly for equipment, not factoring in the cost of the sandbags provided by Perth and Kinross Council. As volunteers, we deal with angry residents when it is close to flooding their property. Residents are not aware of the house of this prior to purchase. This is now a regular risk to property owners. Should the property become flooded, will insurance cover the cost, and what will the premiums be? This is a known flooding area. For Gallowbank development, the proposal amount of properties will certainly be at risk closest to Dunkeld Road. This will lead to additional pressure on the resilience team and will require additional funds. There is also additional risk of the surface water running onto the main A923 Dunkeld Road. With the system they are planning to put in place with the pumps, suds, pond and foul water, is there any action in place for power cuts over a long period of time for the system to back up? The main area of the flooding currently is the area behind the bungalows on the Dunkeld Road. There is no plans showing an additional French drain or such like in the provided areas. Substantial risk of properties in this area. With such a high risk of flooding, as shown in the super flooding maps, more drainage will be required for this area, which are not shown on the plans. With regards to the suds ponds, do they guarantee that they will maintain this during the build to provide silt barrier fencing and for areas that are stripped of topsoil to mitigate risks of neighbouring properties? The local surface water management report was an additional cost to Perth and Kinross Council to Schoolfield Road and Rattray to mitigate the risk of properties being flooded. This solution is to install a variety of defences to attempt to protect properties. This was done earlier this year. The Gallowbank path behind the proposal, there is approximately 3 metre wide of constant flowing water. How will this be controlled? And during the build, there will be a considerable, is there a condition to deal with the surface water to the existing properties on the Dunkeld Road? However, there is no long-term plan in this for the properties in this plan. Thank you.
Excellent timing. Are you willing to take questions from members? Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I'm curious, is there, does it flood regularly? Is there sort of evidence of that within the community?
There are plenty of pictures and just behind the properties, it's a well-known area for flooding.
And roughly how deep does it get?
I couldn't say personally, I've not been in the field, but a number of the residents around there, it's well known, it does get quite deep.
Apologies, Councillor Allen, your question.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thank you, Mr. Richardson, for your deputation today. I got from your deputation that you were part of the Community Council, is that correct? Yeah, now, are you here solely to object about the flooding and the drainage or other aspects? The reason I'm asking that is if there were conditions in there to make sure that the flooding and the drainage was okay, would that be something that would be fitting and would pass your remarks and your needs?
With the resilience team, we've currently increased that from 6 to approximately 12 people. So when there is flooding over in Rattray at the moment, we get a call, and what the resilience team have done, we've got sandbags, pumps, and we go and give advice and support to people who are trying to protect their own properties. And obviously, because this area is known for flooding, if it's not controlled, people are going to buy these properties and then going to expect help. The fire service will only turn up when the water is over 30 centimetres deep. But in the meantime, the resilience team are there to try and support people where they can.
I'm trying to gauge if you're happy if there were conditions in there to deal with flooding and drainage. Would that satisfy your request?
If all the plans are in place and there's no flooding, that's fine. But it would have to be guaranteed that there's going to be no flooding. But there's no guarantee of anything in life, is there?
Councillor James.
Thanks, Vice Convener, and thanks for your deputation today, sir. My question, you spoke very well on the flooding issues, and the Suds Pond for this development is on the opposite side of the A923, the Dunkeld Road. Are you aware of any flooding issues on that side of the road where they plan to put the Suds Pond? Thank you.
I'm not aware of any flooding on that part, but I do understand from the plans, but from the Suds Ponds, it's then going to be pumped away from the Suds Ponds. So if that's a problem, where does all the water back up to? So if it goes from the pipe from the Gallowbank proposal, it's then going to flood the properties just by Dunkeld Road.
Thank you.
Mr. Richardson, there's no further questions. You're free to go. Can I call on Miss Muir, objector to the application? Yep, that's fine. Okay, you're aware that you've got 3 minutes. I'll give you a wee prompt with a minute to go. So I'll start the clock whenever you feel. So I've been reminded to ask your name. Thank you. It's just we have to mark these things down as the records. Okay, whenever you're comfortable to start, please.
The 152 homes that are proposed on this site will eliminate safe, natural and undisturbed passage for our wildlife. It's recognised globally that we're in a nature and biodiversity crisis, with half of our species in rapid population decline, and as a result, 1 in 9 now face extinction. The need for wildlife and green corridors has never been more crucial, and for developers to not take this into deeper consideration within this development is immoral. Regarding management, how can anyone be sure that the biodiversity enhancement plan provided for this site is not greenwashing? Can we really afford to risk this at this time? Who will be responsible for the management and upkeep of the proposed biodiversity enhancements to ensure this development will flourish by boosting levels of flora and fauna for our future generations? For Hillock, a Bronze Age cairn and scheduled monument has several trees marked to be felled as per the Biodiversity Enhancement Plan. This plan also shows a further 35 trees marked for removal around the proposed Suds area of the development. This contradicts paragraph 114 in the report of handling, where it states that 135 trees have been identified within the tree report, of which it is proposed to only remove 3 trees. Ecorna Ecology, who were responsible for carrying out an ecological survey of the proposed development site, reported in their PEA that there were no birds' nests present. This was because the boundary plans provided to them did not include for Hillock. If it had, then Ecorna would have found the active nests of both buzzard and great spotted woodpecker at the time of surveying. Should the removal of these trees go ahead as per the Biodiversity Enhancement Plan, then the welfare of an EU protected species will be put at great risk. Thank you. We are now speeding towards the first man-made mass extinction. This is knowledge we cannot ignore. Plans should be altered and developers should be doing more to react responsibly to this nature and biodiversity crisis. We each need to take responsibility for our actions and do what we can to help secure a future for humans on this planet. Thank you.
Thank you. It might be a bit awkward, the questions, but are you willing to take questions? Okay, give us a moment, Paul. Councillor Allen.
Thanks, Vice Convener, and thank you, Leslie. Just really a reiteration, really. I'm trying to understand, did you suggest that there would be 35 trees removed? Did I get that right?
Yes, there's a further 35 trees marked for removal around the proposed SUDS area of the development.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Leslie, thanks for your presentation. Just a quick question. Can you just go over the issue with the tree examinations for the bird's nest? Was the consultant given the wrong details? Is that what you were implying? Thanks.
I think it would be to do with the timing and the location. So I don't think they looked at as far as Firhillock. If you look at the plan, there's a long area that leads to Firhillock from the SUDS.
There's no further questions. You're free to go. Can I call on Mr. Anton, objector to the application? Mr. Anton, you've been patiently waiting. I know you know the score now, so whenever you're comfortable to start, I'll start the clock.
Blairgowrie's charm lies in its identity as a rural town, its historical significance and sense of community it fosters. The proposed high-density development does not align with Scotland's National Planning Framework 4 and places our local identity under threat. In a formal review of LDP2, a Scottish Government reporter answered local concerns over the site to quote, "There is no reason why a sympathetic development could not be devised in keeping with the gateway position of the site and its residential neighbours, which fits in with the surrounding area. The application ignores healthcare. The Council's report of handling advises that LDP2 does not prioritise healthcare, but Framework 4 both prioritises and supersedes LDP2. Under Policy 15, Health and Wellbeing, developers must ensure sufficient infrastructure for healthcare. This high-density housing development will increase the town's population by 20%. Ardblair Medical Practice has confirmed in writing that while their building could manage more patients, staffing is already at a maximum capacity. Ignoring this critical requirement renders the application flawed. Policy 20. Blue and green infrastructure mandates the protection of Blairgowrie's natural assets and public spaces. But this application plans to sink expansive drainage into the root system of Firhillock, a scheduled ancient monument, jeopardising the 4,000-year-old site. Policy 7's historic asset and places. Section D. The Gallow Bank lies within the Lunan Conservation Area where regulations demand new developments must respect the area's historic character to preserve its distinctive heritage. Policy H mandates rigorous consultation for historic sites as per the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Areas Act 1979. However, the Ardblair estate has not been notified of the application for the development or the plans to remove protected trees from the scheduled ancient monument on their property. Thank you. Ignoring this critical government mandate requirement renders this application flawed and therefore must be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anton. Are you willing to take questions from members?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Anton, there appears to be no questions from members. You're free to go. That's the end of deputation, I'm afraid. Thank you. Can I call on Councillor Shires, local elected member? Councillor Shires, I'm sure you're aware of the procedure. I'll give you a prompt after 2 minutes for you to sum up in your own time.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Thank you, Convener and colleagues. In the 17 years I've represented Ward 3, I've only made representations to this committee on a few occasions. I try and avoid it if I can. But I feel very strongly about this major application. Along with Councillor McEwen and Councillor Braun, we've attended numerous meetings in Blairgowrie to discuss the concerns of the local community. Blairgowrie is a town which has expanded rapidly since I moved there 30 years ago. New homes and businesses have brought a vibrancy to the town, whilst allowing many of the distinctive characteristics which make it a popular location for people to live, raise families and base businesses to be retained. The West Park area MU5 site has been discussed for almost the whole time I've represented the town, and I welcomed the very early engagement with architects and representatives of those developing parts of the site. This led to the development of the retail phase with Lidl and Home Bargains, and the approval recently of the mixed housing phase with much needed affordable housing. Which brings us to the application before you today. You've heard from residents, and I applaud these people who have stepped up to speak on behalf of their community, who have put together their detailed research deputations. And I would simply say that I believe that the application fails to deliver the type of community development that we believe that this site within the LDP would give us. It's poorly designed overdevelopment of the site, and I would ask you to refuse it on the grounds of density and design. I appreciate the time given to my deputation and would ask you to note that, along with the Blairgowrie and Rattray Community Council and the many people who have taken the time to write to you, that all 3 ward councillors, including Councillor McEwen, who I know has emailed you, who sits as housing convener, do not support this application. I would urge you to refuse it and allow us a development to come forward which is sympathetic to this gateway site to the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you willing to take questions from members? Bailey McLeod.
Thank you, Caroline. Councillor Shires. Your concern seems to have a sort of community relation to it. Could you maybe outline within the wider area of Rattray and Blairgowrie community, the access to community spaces? Because that's a sort of nucleus of creating communities. Is there, say, a hall close by to this that this is adjacent that it feeds into, or such as that?
For those, and I noted Councillor Cuthbert's comments at the beginning, thank you very much, Councillor Cuthbert, who've been to the site or come in from the Dunkeld area, which I know you know well, Bailey McLaren. It's very much on the periphery of the town. You've come past historic Ardblair Castle. You can see Newton Castle up on the hill to your left. You then have to travel some distance from the site to access the town hall and various other church halls, etc., and the high schools within easy walk. It does, I understand why the site sits within the local development plan. It is part of the kind of town envelope, although it has been open space. And my objection is not to development of this site because it's been an MU5 for such a long time. I imagine it could be a lovely place for people to live. You've got easy access to our overstretched health facilities. It's just the density and the design of the houses. It just doesn't fit well with that area of Blairgowrie. It's a cracking community. I'm very proud to represent the community, and that's why so many people have stepped up and said, please don't develop it in this manner. It's not appropriate. It kind of went a bit off your question, but hopefully that gave you the context.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Thanks very much, Councillor Shires, for your presentation. You kind of partially answered my question there, but can you just give me, you're not opposed to development of this site, it's just the more the nature of this development is the issue you have. Thanks.
I think Professor Kirkpatrick, who has done an amazing job, and Mr Huddleston looking at the relevant densities within the town. We as councillors want to develop communities that people can take ownership of and enjoy living in. This site could be developed sympathetically, and well, you heard the comments about the reporter about sympathetic development for this gateway site into the town. It's just trying to, and we've had examples of this elsewhere. Councillor Cuthbert, again, thank you, Councillor Cuthbert, referenced other similar developments that they haven't worked. They don't create places that they don't tick our placemaking boxes. They don't create individual communities within a community. They just cram houses into a bit of land, and we deserve to do better than that, in my opinion.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Allen.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Monica Ling. You made mention there passionately about the design and the density of the area, and one of your earlier colleagues talked about number 65 rather than 152. Is that the view of the community, that it's a 65, or is there other numbers, or is it just generally it's too many just now?
I would very much support the 65. There's other development sites coming on stream that can accommodate additional houses. I think if we look at the MU5 site, as you had in the earlier slide, I think approximately around the 65 would sit okay. I would reference the Blackthorn Place development, where we shoehorned a lot of houses into a very small area. And you go there and you feel really sorry for the kids that have got no green space in which to play, that neighbours can't really have places to meet. And I would prefer to see that it would be really appropriate for that site as you come in from Dunkeld, historic Newton Castle on the hill, Ardblair on your right, and the opportunity to develop a really nice site for people to live in.
Thanks for that. Appreciate the answer, but given the development reducing from 152, as is the request just now, down to 65, the developer will probably want to get the best out of that site. And one of the other comments earlier on was it should all be bungalows. And clearly, if it's going down to 65, that will not be their requirement. What's the thoughts on that?
Again, I mean, I would like to think we could work with developers to come up with sites that, just work for everybody. Is it all about money? It doesn't need to be. It could be about, actually them developing a showcase site that they can then, have other communities go to Blairgowrie, see what we've done there. It's an opportunity.
Councillor James.
Thanks, Vice Convener, and thanks for your deputation, Caroline. Spot on as always. My question really sort of carries on from Councillor Allen's Keith's question about the density, and you referred earlier about the appearance of that site as you come into Blairgowrie. Do you think that terraced housing is appropriate on that site, given what's already in that area? Thank you.
I just think this whole application needs to be taken away and looked at again. I think housing design architects can come up with really great solutions to all different styles of houses, but I would just draw again to the fact that, and if you come along Dunkeld Road and you can see the topography of the site, we don't want to lose that. The castle on the left, the view on the right hand side, and I referenced the early stages of MU5's development, really positive conversations with architects about the West Park retail site, which coming in from Perth again was a major change, but actually they've done it well. It looks okay, and I think the community have accepted the design and layout of it. It can be done well, and we should be asking developers to do that because it's what our communities deserve.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Thank you for your presentation, Caroline. My principal concern lies with the properties being built at the bottom end, the southern end of the site, number 73 to 88. These are all 2-storey, as I understand it, and they're going to be built adjacent to the bungalows that are on Dunkeld Road. I'm just wondering what sort of feedback have you had from the Dunkeld Road residents about what's being proposed? Are they coming back to you?
I'm sure you can imagine the feedback. Those are predominantly, I think, 1920s, 40s bungalows, and it would just completely be out of character for that area. They're not happy.
Bailey Williamson.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Caroline. But I was wondering if you could explain to me that you like I was a member of the council when the local development plan was approved last time round with a significantly higher number than what's been proposed now. And I was just wondering if you could outline what's changed between now and then, and why we're now calling for a significantly lower number.
I would reference you back to Professor Kirkpatrick's contribution where he talks about the totality of the site, and it was certainly not my understanding that so many of them would be in that one corner, but it would be spread across the site. And there's plenty scope in the other. I think for me the issue with this, and is probably Mr. Panton would explain it to me well, but I think when we refer to phases, I think people assume that phase 1 of the retail would come on board and then phase 2 and then phase, because that's the kind of language. But the way that it's being developed has meant, I think, that the number being crammed into what we would call the Gallo Bank field is too many, and I think it should be looked at across the piece.
Councillor Shires, there appears to be no further questions. You're free to go. Can I call on Mr. Scotland on behalf of the applicant, Persimmon Homes? I believe you're going to be accompanied by some colleagues. Could we have, I've got more colleagues down on my deputation list than you've got present. Could you introduce your colleagues so that we can, the clerk can note them?
Good morning. I'm joined by my colleague Robert Patrick, our land director, and John McCallum, the planning consultant.
I'm sure you're aware of the procedure. If you would like to do your deputation, I'll give you a prompt with a minute to go in your own time.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and good morning, everyone. We're very pleased to be presenting our plans this morning for high quality homes at Dunkeld Road, plans which have been carefully considered by your own professional officers, extensively consulted on, and are now recommended for approval by the planning officer. We're very proud of this proposed development, which will support the Council's own objective of enhancing the accessibility and, importantly, the affordability of homes for families in Perth and Kinross. The proposals are for a site which has been allocated for housing and already has planning permission in principle. The homes will incorporate an important focus on energy efficiency and net zero. They'll feature solar panels and electric car charging points to help households lower their bills and cut carbon usage. And importantly, the proposals also recognise the views of local residents. We've responded to feedback from the community and the council by reducing the proposed number of homes from 171 to 152, while also recognising the MPF4 requirement to use land efficiently. We've changed the site layout to increase the spacing between the new and the existing homes, and we've extended landscape borders on the site's boundaries. We've also taken account of and made extensive efforts to address any local concerns that the area in its current form has been susceptible to flooding. There's a detailed drainage strategy in place that shows the development would have a positive impact on the area's flood resilience. And more generally, we're proud of the way the development responds to local needs. We all know that affordability is a real issue, and it can be especially hard for younger families and first-time buyers to afford to live where they want to. You as councillors will be more than well aware of those concerns. More housing at an affordable level should be a priority for all of us, and we're really pleased that the average price of our homes in Scotland is around 20% below the market average. That's why a very high percentage of our customers are first-time buyers, and more than 60% of our new homeowners in Perth and Kinross last year were under the age of 40. Thank you. And what's more, the level of need and demand locally is shown by the fact that we've had more than 82 people already express interest in a persimmon home in Blairgowrie, despite the fact that, for obvious reasons, we haven't carried out any sales or marketing activity on it. In addition to prioritising affordability, we've placed a relentless focus on quality and customer service in recent years. That's seen us become a 5-star builder, which is a status that's only awarded when more than 90% of your customers would recommend you to friends and family. And beyond the direct benefits of the development itself, the proposed investment in Blairgowrie includes more than £800,000 to support the local schools. It would also create up to 170 local jobs and create new training and apprenticeship opportunities for local young people as well. So in conclusion, with committee members' support today, our proposals can help ease the housing problems faced by first-time buyers and young families and generate new investment and opportunities to support the local community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Scotland. Are you and your colleagues willing to take questions from members? Councillor Allen.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Thanks, Mr. Gregor, about for your presentation and your deputation and whoever answers. I've just got a wee question there about your comments on affordability. What would the lowest price of one of your accommodations be?
I think we're not at the stage of having our release prices, but Greg has referred to, in general, our house prices are lower than our competitors, and we do have a mix of houses here. And I think that's an important point. We do have a mix of houses from 2 bedrooms upwards, so that's a terrace property at a sort of smaller end of the scale. So I think in terms of affordability, it would be a long way below the average house price in Scotland or indeed in Blairgowrie.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so we don't have the specifics on the house prices for Blairgowrie yet, but what I can say is the average price of one of our homes across all of Scotland in 2023 was around £242,000, which is considerably below the average for a new build property, as Robert suggested.
Can I remind members to ask questions about planning policies, not about business profits and loss? If it's a related planning policy question, please proceed.
Thank you. So it wasn't to undermine your pricing policy, it was to try and get a gauge on affordability and social housing, which doesn't seem to be included in the establishment, but we can help with that. Thanks.
Yeah, I think the office has covered within the presentation the overall PPP site has already got a detailed consent for affordable housing, which will be delivered social rent. I'd imagine elsewhere within the site that fulfills a requirement for the 25% affordable within this PPP area. I think you'll know from other developments we've done within Perth and Kinross, we're perfectly happy to include affordable housing units within our site where it's a requirement of the planning policy. I think the point about the variation of house types within the site is important because we have got a range from 2 bedrooms to 5 bedrooms. That obviously impacts on the density, but that is a requirement of your LDP to have, I think it's 10% of properties being 1 or 2 bedrooms to have that availability of choice. That's an important metric that we always try to hit.
Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Somebody during that presentation, but they mentioned flooding. So Is there a new anti-flooding plan or drainage plan associated with the site that would address some of the objectors' comments from earlier? Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's important to note the site is noted on the flood maps as at risk of surface water flooding. And effectively, I think what you've got is a bowl within the site within the current levels. As part of the engineering of the site, we'll obviously effectively smooth that out. All the surface water will be captured within the site. It would be a requirement in order to get the sign off of your flood team that the runoff rate from this site once it's built will be no higher than what is currently coming off it. So you're actually reducing the flooding elements and effectively capturing everything within it into the suds pond. I think another point to note was there was reference to the surface water being pumped. That's not the case. The suds pond, which is the south of Dunkeld Road, will then flow by gravity to an outfall further south towards the southern part of this site. So yeah, I think on the flooding issue, there is clearly pooling water on the site at present, but we wouldn't have got the sign off from your own flood team if we hadn't come up with a flood strategy, which shows how that's dealt with, captured within the suds pond and released at a rate which is below the current runoff.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thank you for your presentation. As I've said before, my principal concerns are the houses on the southern edge of the development. I'm wondering, what is the distance from the proposed new houses to the backs of the existing bungalows? And on top of that, I'm just wondering, are you putting any mitigation measures in, for example, a buffer zone or planting of vegetation to sort of shelter these houses?
So the properties we've got along the southern edge there have all got the gardens required by your standards, which I think is referred to in the committee report. In terms of a buffer or a landscape treatment, I mean, I think that's something that you could look at by condition if necessary. What we would have is a standard 1.8 metre high fence along our southern boundary. I think there's a challenge around installing additional buffers within a private garden because potentially a resident can do what they want with it. But I think in terms of the amenity, that's been addressed through the planning officer's report, and we've met the guidance, which is to have a 9 metre private garden.
A supplementary there. The initial layout for 171 houses had an alternative layout along that southern extent of the site, and there were properties that were going to be gable end onto the boundary, which were going to be significantly closer than the houses are proposed now. All the houses proposed have the required minimum 9 metre garden depth and meet the standards as detailed in the report.
Bailey McLaren.
Thank you. As you've heard, the previous deputations have great concern on a few issues. And picking up really on what Councillor Caroline Shires said previously about community concerns, consultations, you're saying that you're very proud to bring this high quality, I quote you, and you've extensively consulted on. Could you just maybe give a bit more detail on how you consulted with these communities and how you've then addressed their concerns? Because I'm picking up that these concerns haven't fully been addressed, and it's really disappointing, and I do hope that it's a positive response.
Yeah, I think in terms of how we've addressed the concerns, I think what I would say is we've tried to do what we can within the constraints of us trying to develop a site in line with the PPP, the master plan, the efficient use of land. I think when we hear some of the objectors were looking for 20 houses on the site, 65 houses on the site, I don't think that's in line with the PPP. So I think that what we have done is we've reduced the numbers from 170 to 150, which isn't going as far as some people want, but at the same time, referring back to the requirement to have a mix of houses across the site in order to comply with the garden standards, which we've done, the open space requirements, which we've met. We have met the policy requirements of the site. I think if you looked at a site like this and proposed to put 65 houses on it, it would not be an efficient use of land. In terms of the consultation,
Yeah. The only thing I would add is we recognise with any development, with any proposal for new housing, there are always going to be strong views and there's always going to be a range of views within the local community. We recognise that, and we're not in a position to address every single one of those. That's just not possible. But what we have done is make a real conscious effort to try and move in the right direction where we can, where it is possible. So that is things like reducing the unit numbers, increasing the space, and so where we're able to adapt the proposals to reflect community feedback, we absolutely do that. But at the same time, we recognise there'll be a range of views across the board, and that's just the nature. That's just the nature with any housing development as well.
Thank you. But I asked you about your consultation process because you stated that you had extensively consulted with the local community, and there is a concern that sits within that they haven't maybe been listened to.
Should I just interrupt? I'm sorry to interrupt, but in terms of consultation, this being an approved matters application, there's no requirement for consultation. It wouldn't be a relevant consideration in the determination of this matter. I understand why you're asking.
I was picking up on what was given in
I know,
the
but the
deputation.
consultation isn't a relevant consideration to the determination of this application.
Okay.
Councillor McPherson.
Oh, thank you, Vice Convener. My question is to the deputies is I wonder if they could clarify the situation around the actual density of dwelling houses on the development, as there is a clear dispute about what that actual figure is. Is that calculated on the whole site, or is it just on the total area occupied by the 150 dwelling house plots? Thank you.
I couldn't give you a figure per hectare or acre. I appreciate some of the other deputations have quoted figures. I think we'd refer to the planning officer's report in terms of assessing the density. And I think from our perspective, we would look at that in terms of you've got a requirement for each house to have a certain size of garden. You've got open space requirements per the LDP policy, and we meet those, and therefore we would consider the density to be acceptable. I think, again, the range of house types that you have within the site influences that. Single story or two-story houses, this site is 100% two-story with a couple of 2.5-story houses, which would be, dormer windows, etc. I think in terms of that density, that is what is set out in the PPP and the master plan as meeting the LDP policy. The exact number per acre or hectare, I would say, is less relevant than it meeting the various requirements of the placemaking standards, which I would say we have done so, and that's what the officer's report agrees with.
Councillor Ellingworth.
Thank you. Concern was raised about biodiversity. Can you tell us something about the efforts you're making to support biodiversity?
Yes, I think that's a significant factor. We've obviously had a biodiversity report prepared and submitted, issued to and assessed by the council's green space team, who said they're happy. The details of that will be various biodiversity enhancements, obviously replacement tree planting around the site. Things like hedgehog corridors included, swift boxes and houses, bat boxes, that sort of thing. The details will be within the report, which will then be compliance with that will be part of the conditionality of the approval, should we get an approval, and the management, the maintenance of that will be ongoing throughout the site. So I think it's a fairly comprehensive set of proposals, and again, it's been agreed with the relevant consultees within the council's team.
Just to put some figures on that, 60 Swift bricks and 60 bat boxes are to be contained within development. Just to give some figures for you.
Councillor James.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks for your deputation. My question is quite simple, really. What was your reasoning for terraced housing at the top of the site, And the Suds Pond, why was that decided to be put on the other side of the A923, please? Thank you.
In terms of the location of the housing within the site, I mean, I think the key requirement was not to have any housing above the I think it's the 90-metre elevation height. So we've complied with that. I think we would always look to have a mix of housing throughout the site, so you're not having all the 5-bed houses in one place and creating slightly isolated parts of the site. So it's basically we've gone for a mix throughout, so it's kind of a diverse area. In terms of the location of the Suds Pond, I think in our initial proposals we had the Suds Pond to the north of Dunkeld Road at the site entrance, but I think through discussion with the planning officers and the team, there was a view that as an entrance feature it would be better to have a sort of small pocket of landscaping there and then move the Suds Pond to the southern part of Dunkeld Road. I think it's important to note, obviously this is part of a wider master plan. The area to the south of Dunkeld Road is proposed for housing, and that Suds Pond would ultimately serve those houses as well in the future.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thanks again for the deputation and following with the questions. I know that one of the questions has already been addressed in as much as consultation isn't within this remit. However, on page 40 of our report, it says initially the current application sought approval of 171 dwelling houses. However, this was not seen as appropriate, and the application has taken account of feedback and reduced this number to 152. You've actually reduced it by 11%, and I note that there are no bungalows which would match the surrounding area. Can you maybe address that a wee bit better for me, please? Thanks.
I would say an 11% reduction is a reasonable reduction in line. And I think referring back to my earlier comments and what Gregor was saying in terms of you can't please everyone, I think a lot of the comments that came in from the initial submission were looking at reductions to the level that we've heard about today, which is to sort of 40 to 50, 65 houses. I don't think we could have, well, we definitely couldn't have done that and still supported an application here. So we looked at what was feasible, and that was the reduction that we've come to. I think in terms of bungalows, I would say that we're quite happy to develop bungalows. We've done it elsewhere on sites, but I would expect to see that within the master plan requirements of the site. So this has been through a lengthy PPP process. There's approved master plans for the site. If the site was to be for fully 50% bungalows, then I would expect that to be contained within that. And if that was the case, we would be bringing forward a proposal for in line with that. But that's not the requirement for here.
The reason for asking that question is basically, if you heard all the deputations earlier on, most of them were concerned about the design of the area and what's the word? The density. The design. I mean, with a different mix, you could have come up with a better solution, and it might have been more amenable to the people who had their comments to make earlier on.
I think I'd just refer back to my comments in terms of efficiency of land. I mean, there's a limited supply of allocated housing land within Perfect and also within Scotland. We think it's important that where that land is available, you make best use of it. Greg has referred to the housing crises. If you take a site of this size and put 50 houses on it, you might please some people within the community, but you might not please the 85 people we've got already on our waiting list. So in our view, it is important to maximise the efficiency of the site in line with the requirements in terms of gardens, open space, and an attractive development. So that's what we've attempted to do here. That's what the officers are supporting. So that's our view on it, basically.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Just for clarification, I do have two questions, so I'll just do one first. Again, it's to do with these plots on the southern edge, 73 to 88. I'm just curious, given the elevations and the fact there's bungalows already in existence, I'm just wondering why you didn't plan to put bungalows there so that you wouldn't have this aspect of potential overlooking from a half. I mean, the bungalow is going to just see a bank of windows facing them, and I'm wondering why you didn't go for bungalows in that area.
think I would say, again, in terms of the placemaking guidance that you've got within your LDP, it's been assessed against the overlooking standards. The officers are happy that it doesn't have overlooking issues. It's not uncommon to have a situation where you have new development which is adjacent to bungalows. I don't think it would be a requirement under planning policy to say that where you've got bungalows, you have bungalows adjacent to them. I wouldn't say that would be a standard requirement. So that again, referring to the master plan element of the site, I would expect to see within a master plan that you would identify if there was a requirement for bungalows on a site.
Next question. Yeah, it's to do with the parking within the houses that are being proposed. As far as I can see, a large number of these have the off-street parking outside the property. Certainly in Lathrow Farm, when you come in there, it's similar, and it just feels like a massive car park as you walk through or drive through the site. And I'm just wondering what the rationale for that was, why there wasn't more parking adjacent to the properties rather than in front of them.
Yeah, I think in terms of the parking on this site, that's something that was developed through, if you compare the layout we've got here to the original layout, there was quite a lot of discussion with the officers on that. And what we've tried to do is on the sort of primary routes into and through the site, to try and have as much parking as possible up to the side of properties, and then on the more tertiary streets, maybe have a mix of frontage parking. It's a balance of keeping cars as hidden away as possible. Obviously, you've got quite stringent parking requirements in terms of the numbers of parking spaces per dwelling, which means that you are naturally going to have quite a lot of spaces within the site. But I think what we've done is, if you look particularly at the street just to the north of Dunkeld Road, we've tried to tuck as much parking to the side on the initial properties, so you're not going to be met when you come into the site with a sea of car parking. There will, again, where you've got things like terrace properties, which are a requirement if you're to have two-bed houses, then there will be more parking in a concentrated area, but we tried to do our best to keep that in the less visible parts of the site.
I come back just to say, I mean, in principle, if you look at the plan, it's the same unit 73 to 88. It's also the ones on Dunkeld Road. So as you're driving into Blairgowrie on the Dunkeld Road, you're going to see these houses actually with just, it's like a car park as you come in, and that presumably will affect the visual amenity.
Are you referring to the properties directly off Dunkeld Road and the parking arrangements for them?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the arrangement they've got. Obviously, you've got a slightly different density of development there from what is existing on Dunkeld Road, but the properties along Dunkeld Road there have got parking in front of them. It's not different. There will be an element of obviously landscaping between the parking areas to try and break that up. It won't just be. It's not a sea of tarmac from wall to wall. It will be parking spaces, then elements of landscaping. So that would be our proposal.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Vice Convener. You'll be glad to know this is my last question. Okay. There was a deputation earlier on and they made mention of the number of trees that would be removed within the site. Can you let me know how many mature trees will be removed as a consequence of this? Thank you.
I couldn't tell you the number off the top of my head. I think it will be reported within the tree reports we've got. I think there's obviously compensatory planting. I think what I would point out is you can see on the plan put quite a lot of work into protecting the trees around the western, northern and eastern boundaries. There are trees that you can see coming out within the Suds Pond area, which is kind of it's quite unavoidable in order to develop the Suds Pond in that area. What I would say is there'll be conditions around ecology surveys prior to taking any trees out and bird nesting seasons or anything like that. So we've done the ecology surveys. When we come to take the trees out, quite happy to send someone back out prior to doing that. So I couldn't give you an exact number of trees. I think it'll probably be contained within the report.
Gentlemen, there's no further questions. You're free to go. Convener, there's no further deputations on this application. I'll hand back to yourself.
Okay, thank you very much, Vice Convener. Can I ask if members have any questions for officers? And I will start with the questions as a follow-on from Councillor Allen's question and Miss Muir's deputation. And it's about the trees. And it does say at 114 contained within the report that 135 trees have been identified, but only 3 to be removed. Now, this goes against what Miss Muir's deputation stated. Can you explain that, why there's why there's a difference there?
I certainly can, Convener. So Miss Muir is correct, and our report could have been clearer there, but just to clarify, 135 trees are to the north of the Dunkeld Road, of which 3 are to come down. So the report says just 3 to come down. That doesn't account for the suds. So Miss Muir is correct in picking that up with the suds. The area to the west of the suds, as shown in the plan in front of you, the trees are to come down there. However, these are identified within the tree report of being of poor quality. I would also highlight that they could come down today without any consent from the planning authority. But to give some members reassurance, condition 28 protects all further trees on the development, and no trees can come down which aren't identified in that tree report. So it's 3 to the north of the A923 and all the trees surrounding the suds basin.
Thank you, Mr. Panton. So we'll go on to first question. First question is from Bailey Williamson.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Convener. My question is really about paragraph 36, which is health provision. It seems from what's been said by the medical practice there, they will struggle to provide that medical care for people, but at the same time we have the local development plan where the NHS were consulted, and quite clearly it's been changed. And my question is what flexibility is there within our policies to accept this later comment from the NHS?
Thanks, Bailey Williamson. So yes, just to confirm as well, the NHS and Health and Social Care Partnership are not a statutory consultee, and we only consult them as a request of this committee. So they're not a statutory consultee, but on this occasion they have come back and said they've got no objection, but they do highlight there will be additional pressure, but they accept as well that the PPP has consent and they don't want to resist. Now, in terms of what we can do at this moment in time, our developer contributions policy does not account for healthcare provision, so it would be incompetent for us to ask for a healthcare contribution at this time or hold on that basis. But I can give members reassurance that as part of the LDP3 process, we are looking at incorporating a contribution towards healthcare, but we're not there yet. So there's not much we can do as part of this application. And like I say, they're not a statutory consultee. We've only done it as a request from this committee.
Thank you. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you. A lot of the deputies talked about density. Why do you think that 23 dwellings per hectare is acceptable?
Thanks, Councillor Illingworth. So the short answer is because that's what was indicated in the master plan that was supported in principle. But I would reiterate that when this application did come in, it was 171 houses. We negotiated that down to 152. So that is a reduction of 19. So we have sought a reduction to make sure it's in line with that consented master plan. So the short answer is we're accepting that number because that's what the master plan had indicated as acceptable.
I'll maybe give a slightly longer answer to that, and I think it's been touched by various parties as well that it's really important that we have an efficient use of land to avoid further greenfield areas being the only way of delivering Perth and Kinross's housing needs. And as I'm sure all members will be aware, there is an announced housing emergency in Scotland. In terms of housing density, there is no established methodology, and there are many different approaches to measuring housing density, and often that depends on the focus of the parties which are undertaking the calculation, that they may look at particular areas to give a particular answer that might suit their argument, whatever that argument is. But in this case, it's certainly not my view that this is anywhere near high density, that being what you might see in city centres with multi-storey properties. It is, however, the case that it could be seen that there are increased densities from some of the properties that surround it, but certainly from my experience and also having worked in the house building industry, this is low to medium density housing on the periphery of an established town, and it's very efficient use of the land to minimise the land take to provide housing during a housing emergency.
Thank you. And we next go to Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Convener. Just a quick question. One of the objectors discussed traffic-related issues. I wonder if you could just go through the traffic figures just to assure us that they are relevant and reasonable. Thanks.
Lachlan, can you answer that one, please?
Yes, Convener, thank you for the question there. In terms of the traffic numbers that we're expecting from the development, in the AM we're expecting 52 vehicles to depart the site, and that will obviously disseminate through the network within Blairgowrie itself. So what we're looking at is 23 vehicles heading along Dunkeld Road and then heading towards the town centre itself, with 29 heading south towards the Perth area within Blairgowrie. And obviously there'll be some of the traffic will be going to Beaches Road, Golf Course Road, and then also heading to the retail centre that's there as well. In the PM we're expecting 26 vehicles to depart the site heading into Blairgowrie, and that will obviously distribute across the network as well. In terms of arrivals in the AM, we're expecting 21 vehicles to arrive into the site, and similarly that will come from the network itself. In terms of from the town centre, it's estimated that will be 8 vehicles, and then coming from the south of the network around 11 vehicles. In the PM period we're expecting 54 vehicles to arrive in the site there, with 21 coming from the town centre itself and 27 coming from the south of the network there. Hopefully that answers your question there.
Yeah, thanks very much for that.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bailey McLaren.
Thank you. In one of the deputations, I think it was Mr. Anton, he highlighted the Lunan catchment area. Could the officers maybe expand on where you see that this has been met, the requirements of the respect given to that Lunan catchment area, etc.?
Thanks, Bailey McLaren. Yes, so the main thing about that is obviously the environmental impacts to the drainage and the likes. So when our flood team initially reviewed the information that was submitted, we did have to ask for some further clarification on a few elements. We've now got that clarification and we're satisfied with the conditions that are attached to the consent, that there is no breach at all upon the Loch Lunan catchment.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thanks, Convener. I'm just concerned slightly about a comment that was made there about a national housing emergency. We can't just address that at any need. We need to meet the needs of planning requirements and local requirements responsibly, and not just because we've got an emergency national need. Thank you.
Yes, I'm not sure what the question was there, but just to clarify as well, one of the things about density was about the plots, particularly that adjoin the properties on the Dunkeld Road, the bungalows that are there. I've just measured on the plan there, just to give you exact distances, because I'm aware the report only says they're in excess of 9 metres. Of the plots that back onto Dunkeld Road, it ranges. Some plots have 9 metres, some plots have 10, some 11, and some go up to 13. So we are well above the placemaking guidance. So your comment there about the housing emergency can't be addressed at any cost, I agree, but with some of these plots at 13 metres, that's well beyond our 9 metre requirement.
Thank you. And can I remind the committee that we have got an opportunity for comments at the end of this. Thank you. Councillor James.
Yeah, thanks, Convener, and thanks, Sean. My question is quite direct, I suppose, really. I'm looking at policy, looking at LDP policy 1A and 1B, especially 1B, consider respect site topography and surrounding and important landmarks. Considering this site, we've got 2 castles, we've got an ancient scheduled monument, and it's at the entrance to triple SIs, Lunan Valley. Do you really, what was your theory in thinking that this actually fits with policy 1A and particularly 1B? Thank you.
I can answer that for you, Councillor James. So as we saw in the photographs at the beginning of the presentation, it is quite a sloping site. It slopes upwards from south to north. So it is a difficult site to develop without the need for massive retaining walls and the likes. Now, in terms of the surrounding conservation points that you've indicated, as we've seen as well, the site is bound by mature trees and only 3 of them are to come down. So we feel that this will be quite well contained within the existing remits of the site. So from a placemaking perspective, we are satisfied that with the topography of the land, the way they can develop it without the need for massive retaining walls and retaining that mature tree belt is good placemaking standards without having an impact upon any of the conservation designations nearby.
Thank you. Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Convener. It'll come as no surprise. My question relates to the properties 73 to 88 on the plan. I'm curious, in terms of mitigation measures, I'm concerned that you've got these 2-story buildings looking straight over onto existing bungalows. Can we specify, and as a condition, some sort of mitigation measures, and if so, what would they be? And I'm also interested to know, can we specify that these should be changed to bungalows? Because obviously a bungalow doesn't have the same overlook aspect that the 2-story buildings have. Is that something we can specify?
Thanks, Councillor Cuthbert. So first of all, when the application was submitted at the 171 houses, as Mr McCallum indicated in his deputation, some of the houses there were turned so that the gable ends were facing the immediate boundaries of the houses on Dunkeld Road, which we felt was unacceptable. We felt that invaded their privacy too much. So what we've got before us now is the revised scheme. Now, because most of these plots go beyond the 9-metre boundary, I personally don't think it'd be competent to put a condition on about boundary treatments. However, if you saw that fit as a local member, you could put a condition on that plots XYZ could have an additional tree planted in the rear garden, for example, that you could do that. But we don't think it's necessary because some of these plots extend 13 metres, which goes beyond the guidance, as I've already said. In terms of asking them to be bungalows, I don't think that would be a competent motion because there is no site-specific requirement for that. There's nothing within the master plan that was approved to say it must be bungalows. All we're really asking for is that the properties respect the neighbouring properties on Dunkeld Road, and we feel that this scheme does. So hopefully that's a bit of background about what we had, where we are now, and what you can do if you see fit.
Maybe just to add to that, I don't think that it's unusual at all to see the arrangements that are in place here. Many hundreds, if not thousands, of properties across Perth and Kinross and then beyond will see exactly the same arrangement of property backing onto each other. And it meets with our place standards. The distances are appropriate. It wouldn't be seen to be unacceptably impacting upon amenity or privacy.
Yeah.
Just to say, the reason I'm focusing on this so closely is that within Lathrow Farm, there's been a lot of problems and issues with residents over just this. Like, just to give you an idea, I think these bed benches that you're sitting at roughly are 9 metres. That's the distance that you've got built in, and residents who live on Lathrow Farm, live on Lathrow Park as it was, have caused or raised a lot of concerns with me as a local member about how it's affected them, and they've all tried to put hedges and things like that in themselves in their own gardens. I understand the rules that 9 metres is what you've got to fit to, but it doesn't mean you've got to fit to it. You can go to a greater depth and you can do other things as well. And I'm just concerned that what we're doing here is just saying, well, that's the rules. We're sticking to the rules, but we can comply with the rules, therefore it's not a problem. When, as I say, my personal experience with residents is that actually it is a problem.
Thanks, Councillor Cuthbert, but I disagree with the point that we're sticking to the rules because, as I've said, some of these plots are 10 metres, some 11 and some 13, so we have gone beyond that 9 metres. But I don't think you had the question as such in there, so that was just a comment from me.
Yes, I believe that was a comment again, which I'll remind members that you've got an opportunity to comment at the end. So we're on to Councillor Illingworth. You have 2 questions. Just ask them both.
Great, thank you. One of the deputies talked about access to public transport. How far is it from the site to the nearest bus stop, roughly?
Lachlan, can you answer that?
Yes, I'll answer that one. Sorry, just let me pop my camera on a second. So the question was in relation to the nearest bus stops. Is that correct? I just want to double check that that's the question that's been asked there.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So the nearest bus stops, predominantly there is a bus stop outside the development site, which takes you towards Dunkeld itself. So the number 60 bus goes along the road there. It's not very frequent, but there are bus services that use that. So your nearest bus stops to the site will be on Perth Road itself.
Thank you. Second question is around protection of the scheduled monument.
Thanks, Councillor Illingworth. So just
what was the question?
Yeah, you're right. The question is really to find out what the protection is for the scheduled monuments.
So yes, I'd direct you to paragraph 30. So as you can see, we have consulted Historic Environment Scotland as a statutory consultee as part of this application, and they have no objection. However, the applicant is reminded that any works that take place south where the Suds Basin is, that they must avoid any accidental damage to the scheduled monument. So that will include the removal of the trees, but Historic Environment Scotland have assessed what's been submitted and have no objection to offer, so they're satisfied there'll be no impact upon the scheduled monument.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bailey McLaren.
Thank you, Convener. I am going back to deputation from Councillor Shires. She was strong in her concern that this design and development is not sympathetic to the community and will fit in with the community. Is there any way that this could be addressed in conditions within if we were minded to approve this?
Sure, what you're getting at there, but we have a development in front of us that what the report recommends approval for.
Well, her concern was, I'm picking up that her concern was more about the design element of it, maybe not enough of an opportunity of green space, children, and I would just like to get that reassurance that you feel that this development will in fact assist with community cohesion.
Well, we're recommending approval of the development, so we are satisfied with it. There are significant areas of green space and boundary around it. I think what you may be alluding to is, can we get a different scheme? But we have a scheme in front of us that we're recommending meets all the relevant criteria, policies, procedures, etc. So that would be a different proposal. So we're looking at whether this proposal is acceptable or not.
Bailey McLaren, I just further come in on that. The concerns that Councillor Shires raised in her deputation, we agreed with 171 scheme, hence why we sought all these amendments. So this scheme before us now is the one that we've got the amendments on and the one we are happy with. So we did share those concerns to start off with, but for the avoidance of doubt, we now feel that this is suitable.
Thank you. No further questions. Oh, Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Convener. LDP2 indicative figure for the whole West Park development for residential was 179 to 280. And principal decision in 2018 was 400, with 120 for this site. Can we address that, please?
Thanks, Councillor Allen. So I direct you to paragraphs 140 to 142, where we have looked at the numbers that have been consented and this consent and how that relates to the master plan. So it would mean that if this development is granted, it's still within the range of the LDP. However, it does only leave a figure of 25 for the southern site. But that is something that the developer is aware of. But for the avoidance of doubt, we are content that the numbers still are in line with our LDP.
Thank you. Any further questions? No further questions, then I'll ask for a motion, and I see that Councillor Cuthbert, you have put a motion in already. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. I actually had one prepared as a draft, if you like. I'd ask if they could put it up on screen so people can read it. I looked at this very carefully, following my experience in Kinross with Lathrow Farm, and I put forward this motion basically on the basis that I was going to ask questions, find out if anything had changed. But if I can give people a couple of minutes to read that, they can see what I'm proposing. I can speak to it if you want, just to say that in principle, I've asked the questions around the other aspects of this, but these are the things I think that distilling out of the problems I have with Lathrow Farm, these are the things I think that are relevant. So I'm basically proposing this, putting this forward. And I don't know if I've got a second, but I haven't asked anybody.
Do we have a seconder for this motion? Councillor James.
Yeah, I'm happy to second Councillor Cuthbert on this one, Convener. I noticed he's put in MPF 4 policy 14. I was also, while we've been looking at this, I've got it up in front of me, MPF 4, and I'm also looking at 16 G 1 and 2. Household development proposals will be supported when they do not have a detrimental effect on the neighbouring properties in terms of physical impact and overshadowing, overlooking, and what have you. I think in this instance, given the circumstances, in fact, that Councillor Cuthbert's been talking about extensively this morning, the houses that are already there, I think this will have an impact on them and surrounding properties and the surrounding area. So I would include that as well if Councillor Cuthbert's happy. But I'd be more than happy to support what he's put.
Councillor James, I've just looked at policy 16G. Do you believe that the houses overlook? Because I don't think they overshadow or overlook.
Okay, Convener, if you look at G1, they do not have household development proposals will be supported where they do not have a detrimental impact on the character or environmental quality of the home and surrounding area. I think they do have an impact.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Come in, Convener.
Yeah.
Convener, could I just make comments, Councillor James, on policy 16? I think I understand where you're coming from, but given the terms of the motion, I think the motion concentrates on, focuses on the particular policies that are most relevant to the reasons for refusal. So I would suggest you don't add in 16 because the focus is already there and targeted in terms of policy 14. And also, as you'll be familiar with, policies 1A and 1BC of the placemaking policy of LDP, you should always focus on the most important policies. Policy 16 is a more difficult fit. But it is obviously Councillor Cuthbert, whether he wants to add that in.
I get that. Sorry, Dave. I do get that, Colin. But you were saying before, you know, that NPF4 has more bearing than our LDP. So I was just
Yes, but
all I was doing was covering bases. That's all.
I understand, Councillor James, but NPF4 is already in both grounds of refusal, both for policy 14. But I won't say more. It's really obviously Councillor Cuthbert that has to think about it as well.
I'm happy to take the legal advice. I think all it will do is complicate things if it goes to appeal at the DPEA. So I'd rather keep it as it is, if you don't mind.
So Councillor James, on that, are you still willing to second the motion?
Yeah, very happy. All I was trying to do was bolster it, convener.
Okay.
But yeah, they're happy
Okay.
to go with what Councillor has put there.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask if there is an amendment? My screen has went blank. Right, so I'll put forward an amendment to approve the application. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Harvey?
Happy to second.
Thank you. Any other amendment? Okay, thank you. Can I ask members if they have any comments on the report? Bailey Williamson.
Thank you, convener. I think it's a great shame that the NHS are not involved in as consultees, and I'm genuinely hoping we can actually pick this up, as Sean indicated earlier, in the next local development plan. Time has moved on since we agreed the local development plan in 2017, and circumstances have changed dramatically. And I think it's important that we do recognise the level of healthcare that communities are receiving.
Thank you. Any further comment? No further comments. Then I will. Well, can't comment. I will forgo my right to sum up. So I will now ask Councillor Cuthbert as the motion to sum up, if he wants.
Thank you. I should have put that in the chat rather than a comment. In principle, I'm not against this site being developed. I think it's, as has been said by the residents, it's been in the local development plan for a long time. I do, and I have big concerns about the existing houses on the southern edge of this site, and I do feel that their amenity is going to be seriously affected. And I'm also concerned about the look of the site when you've actually got it built and people in it. It does just become like a giant car park. So that's the reason for the second point of refusal. But as I say, I'm not against the site being developed. It's just this current proposal.
Thank you. We'll now hand over to Mr. Elliott to give the terms of the motion and the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. First of all, we have the motion, which is to refuse. Obviously, the terms of the motion are actually displayed on screen, so I won't narrate it, but there are two grounds for refusal, referring to the character of the area, regimented design, appearance of too many houses. The other ground of refusal relates to the off-street parking being provided immediately at the front of the proposed houses. So that's the motion for refusal by Councillor Cuthbert and Councillor James. The amendment is by convener and Councillor Harvey, which is to approve, which I'm assuming is in line with the recommendation in the report, which includes conditions and informatives and contribution to be made. Okay.
Hey members, when I call out your name, if you can advise if you are voting for the motion or the amendment. Councillor Allen.
Motion.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Motion.
Councillor Harvey.
Amendment.
Councillor Illingworth.
Amendment.
Councillor James.
Motion.
Councillor Massey.
Amendment.
Councillor McPherson.
Amendment.
Bailey McLaren,
Motion.
Councillor Stewart,
Amendment.
Bailey Williamson,
Amendment.
We have 4 votes for the motion and 6 votes for the amendment. Therefore, the amendment will carry.
Thank you for that. Therefore, planning permission is granted, and subject to the conditions and report of handling. Thank you. We will now take a 10-minute recess. Thank you. Okay, then we move on to 512, which is the siting of 68 holiday accommodation units and managers accommodation unit, including formation of vehicle access, erection of a hub building, landscaping, car parking and associated works at land 1 kilometre west of Muirhead Cottage, Auchterarder, and to introduce the report is Mr. Smith. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. First, I'll give a brief summary of the recommendation and then take you through some images to give you a context to the proposals. So firstly, the application seeks permission for development based around a large number of holiday lodges, all within what is currently 10.5 acres used for arable crops straddling across 2 fields. Sorry if everybody couldn't hear me there. I do have quite a loud voice and sometimes I don't compensate for it enough. I'll start again. So the application seeks permission for a development based around a large number of holiday lodges, all within what is currently 10.5 hectares used for arable crops, straddling 2 open fields. That reflecting the arable use of the soils. They are good quality, being classed as 3.2. Fields are located off the A823 between Gleneagles and Mouthall, some distance outside Auchterarder, and with open and wide views across Strathallan, reflective of the open landscape. Officer assessment of the application as set out in the report has found little support for the proposals and the policies of the development plan, whether that be NPF 4 or LDP 2. Particularly, the principle of development is considered contrary to policies on rural development, as are matters of detail. All this sees the proposals considered to significantly conflict with policies in both the national and local context. After thorough assessment and consideration of similar proposals for the site over the recent years, there do not appear to be any obvious material considerations which would give any significant weight to departing from the policies of the development plan. And I just wanted to mention that there are indications within the application submissions that voluntary contributions are to be made to various facilities within Auchterarder and surrounding area. However, these are not required by planning policy, not obviously relating to the development itself, and cannot be controlled by any planning permission. To an extent, they are not planning issues associated to the proposals and of limited, if any, relevance in the decision-making processing. Turning to the images, the first image, please. There we go. This is a satellite view of the site location, showing its separation across other fields to the strongly defined settlement boundary of Auchterarder to the east and Muirton to the south. The Gleneagles estate is to the south or southwest as you look at the plan. The image also shows how the site straddles across 2 fields. The next slide. This looks from close to the proposed entrance point towards Muirton along the existing road, which is subject to the national speed limit and without pavements. Next slide, please. We can see here a view across in an easterly direction across the Strathearn Valley. Next. Here we see a view across the site from south to north, with the area of Hardcore somewhat visible to the left and alongside the road. Next slide, please. Then have an image looking from the opposite direction, so facing in a southeasterly direction, with the Ochils in the distance and some houses just outside Auchterarder in the centre of shot. Next. Now move to a series of plans and visuals to show aspects of the proposed development. Firstly, this is the proposed layout with the communal hub building and manager's house just off the access, then lodges and various groupings. The aspects of landscaping are also shown. Next, this is a series of images which are artist impressions of the proposed buildings. This first one being one of the lodges. Next, again, one of the lodges. The next image, please. And this is the last image. This is the communal hub building, and that is to contain a small gym and a farm shop and deli, as well as reception and some other facilities. We then return to the layout, which I'll leave you with. Thank you, convener. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We do have deputations on this item, so I'll now hand over to the Vice Convener for the deputations procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. Can I call on Mr. Warrington, who is Auchterarder Community Bus Group and is supporter of the application. Mr. Warrington, you'll be aware that you've got 3 minutes for your deputation. I'll give you a prompt about a minute to go, and I'll start the clock whenever you feel comfortable to start.
Good morning. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. I circulated what I'm saying this morning by email yesterday to all the councillors, so hopefully some of you had the opportunity to see it already. I'm Andrew Warrington. I'm chair of Auchterarder Community Bus Group, and I want to speak in support of the application today for this planning application. There are a good number of voluntary organisations in Auchterarder are very active, and we're trying to do things that make Auchterarder a better place to live. One of the things, an Ancres have engaged with us as one or two possible charities, and another one's going to come up and speak to you shortly, to try and work with us to try and provide facilities in the town. Now, the reason I'm stood here is we're a charity. A number of years ago, we set up the Auchterarder Bus Group to provide a local town bus service. There is a need in the village. And a number of people were isolated, were unable to go about their daily activities. So we set up the bus as a charity and have run it for a number of years. That has been proven to be popular. It runs 4 days a week at present. We used initially monies that came from the local housing developers, the Auchterarder Community Facilities Fund. We've been approached by Ancres Limited, who are willing, if their application is approved, to provide us with a funding stream for the next few years. As with every charity, we struggle on occasions to continue to function. So we're very grateful to them for the funding contribution they would make. They've been very positive in their engagement with us about them, and we've highlighted to them the importance of the town bus. I think it's also relevant to say that they've also been very good in terms of this specific site and its access to the town. They're talking about obviously rerouting the local bus network into the site and providing Auchterarder, as you'll be aware, has concerns about parking, traffic. Ancres have responded to that very positively, and so they are working with the community and have had good engagement with the community. So in terms of my support for them is, we hope that they are successful. It will guarantee the town bus and its future for the next 4 years if they give us some funding as a result of this application.
Thank you, Mr. Warrington. Are you willing to take questions from members if they wish? If members could populate the chat box. Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm just curious, in terms of the money that you might get from this development and the support, how critical is it to the bus group? Would the bus group continue to thrive even without the money, or is it life-threatening?
It is a very crucial part. We have, as I said, have had monies previously through the Auchterarder Community Development Fund. We've also approached other charities and funding bodies and have raised over £300,000 so far. That is a continual process. So to some extent, this is crucial funding for us going forward, and would guarantee the town bus 2 days a week for the next 4 years. What we would then do as a charity is we would then go out and try and supplement that money from other sources.
Mr. Warrington, there's no further questions. You're free to go. Can I call on Ms. Watt, Auchterarden District Sports Hub, and talking in support of the application? Ms. Watt, be aware that you've got 3 minutes. I'll give you a prompt with 1 minute to go. Okay. So in your own time. Thank you.
Thank you to the committee for allowing me the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Auchterarden District Community Sports Hub. We think the final version of these proposals are well considered and they've been well consulted on within the community, especially with us as one of the recipients of potential voluntary contributions. We are in favour of the proposals for the holiday lodges presented by Anchoress Limited. By way of a background, the Sports Hub is a Scottish charity governed by a board of trustees and operating the school sports facilities on behalf of the local community. We're all also local members of the community and run the Sports Hub purely as a community benefit. We offer and support a variety of sports, including pickleball, football, badminton, table tennis, cheerleading, volleyball, and five-a-side, to name but a few. And we also operate a fully equipped gym. However, we are also creaking at the seams a bit, and our indoor space is almost fully booked every single night. We actually don't engage in any marketing because we literally have nowhere to put any new users that come into the facility. We exist to support and promote active lifestyles, and Anchoress Limited initially engaged with us to identify and understand our community needs for sporting provision and have been clear and explicit in the level of their support. Through our partnership, we will be able to significantly enhance our existing facilities by way of an upgrade to the 2 multi-use games areas situated at the school. These courts are currently in a considerable state of disrepair and are not fit for use, with significant damage to the playing surfaces and surrounding fences. Doing so will allow greater access and usage of the sports than we currently have space for, and it also provides additional valuable teaching space to the Community School of Auchterarder, where the facilities are based. Auchterarder is a vibrant and thriving town. As a community organisation, we welcome positive economic development of activity in the area, and we believe these proposals present such an opportunity. I hope councillors will support this application, as it will be most welcomed in the community. Thank you.
Ms. Watt, are you willing to take questions from members?
I am.
Can I remind members to keep questions to planning policy, please? Ms. Watt, there appears to be no questions. Thank you for your time. Okay. Can I call on Mr. Kay from Auchterarder District Community Council, who is in support of the application? Mr. Kay, I'm sure you're aware of the procedure. I'll just start the clock when you're comfortable to start.
Thank you, Vice. Thank you. I'm Ali Kay. I'm the chair of the Auchterarder District Community Council. We look after the area that this development will fall under. At a recent community council meeting in Tullabarton, there were absolutely no objections. In fact, there was positivity from the residents of Tullabarton, which is the adjoining area, for this development. Can I say that throughout this, Anchoress have been very, very good at coming to us, telling us of their proposals, listening to what people have said about it, clarifying any misconceptions. This development, the community feels, will bring extra employment to the area. It will also be beneficial because it will bring more people who will purchase in the town, who are already bursting High Street with some very, very good shops, will be supported by the people coming to the development. We already enjoy Gleneagles trade, the visitors to Gleneagles. So again, this will boost the High Street again. Excuse me. The tourism in Auchterarder is very important because we have with the Lang Toon, we've been there for a long, long time. We're the longest high street in Perthshire, and I really feel that this development will work very sympathetically with our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kay. Are you willing to take questions from members? Okay, please give it a moment. Mr. Kay, there doesn't appear to be any questions for you, so you're free to go. Thank you. Can I call on Mr. Rankin, agent for the application, and Mr. Gillespie, the applicant? Morning, gentlemen. Are you both wanting to make a deputation? So you've got sort of like 6 minutes as a joint deputation. How you use that 6 minutes is up to yourselves. So whenever you're ready to start, please proceed.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. If consented, the Braes will be a premium holiday village comprising 60 low-carbon 2 and 3 bedroom lodges. This is a reduction from a previous application of 122 units. The planning application has a huge amount of community support, which we will have demonstrated today. We have signed partnerships agreements with each of the community groups, and these are legally binding. We are also using local contractors to build out the site. Island Leisure, based in Perth, will build sustainable bespoke lodges, and Kieran Trading of Blackford will carry out groundworks and infrastructure. Between them, these businesses support over 50 jobs in Perthshire. Apart from the quality design, the main thing that sets us apart from other lodge developments is our lodges are only made available on freehold sales. Not only are freehold sales unique in the marketplace, but they allow us to keep control of the occupancy of the lodges through the individual property titles and the deed of conditions which will be put in place. The deed of conditions is important as we will not permit the lodges to be used as holiday lets or permanent homes, and this will be enforced by our on-site manager who will live there permanently. The site has been selected for its proximity to the existing amenities of Gleneagles Hotel, also being located next to the town and the settlement boundary, and both locations are accessible on foot. Another key reason we have chosen this location is because there are no other sites available to provide a low density layout. To the west of Gleneagles, the land is consented at G West and Gleneagles Easterton Farm. Next to our site, there is a farm shop, and next to that, 38 residential units consented. The only sites large enough within the settlement boundary to accommodate the development are allocated for housing, business and industrial uses. Auchterarder and Gleneagles golf courses to the south form another barrier. It is not possible for our site to be any closer to the settlement. In Auchterarder, the hospitality sector has taken a bit of a hit over the past 18 months. The Chinese restaurant, the chip shop, Henderson's restaurant, the Thistle Bar have all closed. We have submitted 15 letters from businesses in the high street, and what is clear, taxis, cafes and shops and business community want the economic benefits we will deliver. Lastly, we have no statutory objections, and that highlights that this is a good application and a good scheme. We have a strong community involvement and support, and I hope you will support this application and the various community groups that we are working with. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. So my name is Murray Rankin from Graham and Sibbald, and I'm the planning consultant for this project. The planning department has set out 4 reasons for refusal of the application, and in the time I have today, I will provide a response to these in the round. The applicant has given some context on the location of the site and why it was chosen, and I feel it's also worth mentioning that while it is largely made up of agricultural land, the site also comprises a not insignificant portion of brownfield hardstanding and has previously been in a number of uses, including overflow car parking, storage and a media centre during sporting events at Gleneagles. The site is, at very least in part, brownfield and might in fact meet, at least in part, the emerging concept of grey belt land due to its previous use condition and lack of other constraints. Similar developments in the vicinity, such as Lochmanna Holiday Lodge Park and Grand Eagles Luxury Lodge Park, set an appropriate precedent for this land use in rural areas, as well as a consented Easterton Farm proposal to the west of Gleneagles. Contrary to the recommended reasons for refusal before you, we maintain that the proposal accords with NPF4, particularly Policy 29, which gives grounds to support, and I quote, development proposals that contribute to the viability, sustainability and diversity of rural communities and the local rural economy. Policy 30, tourism, also requires proposals to consider a contribution to the local economy and be compatible with the surrounding area. And this has been established by the substantial benefits outlined in the socio-economic statement, namely the estimated 31 jobs directly on the site, direct support for further employment elsewhere in the economy, the associated £1.7 million gross value added these jobs will bring, and an estimated over £2 million per annum in guest off-site spend, predicted to be largely retained in the local economy. The reasons for refusal also contend that the proposal is contrary to LDP2 Policy 8 and Policy 9 on account of failing to demonstrate a relationship to a site-specific resource or opportunity. As highlighted today by the applicant and in our initial submission, the site-specific opportunity here is the location close to the Glen Eagles complex, but on the edge of the urban setting, providing guests with the benefits of a rural environment with walking distance to nearby attractions. And on this basis, we dispute the finding that the proposal is contrary to LDP2 Policies 8 and 9. We note that Nature Scot have raised no objection with reference to landscape and visual amenity, and that the proposed development site lies in an area of countryside which is not subject to any landscape designations. The landscape and visual impact assessment found that the proposed development would only be theoretically visible from 11.5% of a study area and concluded that only local residual landscape and visual effects would occur. It is our opinion that the development with the creation of new woodlands and associated habitats supports NPF4 Policy 3 and will integrate successfully into the wider landscape. We therefore believe that the proposal does represent a high quality development, is well designed on account of its scale, materials and layout, and has minimal landscape impacts, which would be mitigated and compensated for, and it's therefore compliant with NPF4 Policy 14 and LDP2 Policy 1 and 39. Planning applications require to be made in accordance with the development plan in place at the time, unless material considerations justify a departure from this. The officer's report considers that the proposal is contrary to the development plan and that there are no material considerations apparent to justify this. And notwithstanding that we strongly dispute this, we also consider that the significant social, economic and community benefits have not been given fair weight in the planning balance, and that these alone give grounds to consider an alternative recommendation for the proposal. Overall, we hope in our limited time today to have demonstrated the benefits that this scheme can bring, from the significant public support received, the social, economic and community benefits, and the alternative view on the planning merits that show it can be supported by the relevant policies. The site is in a suitable and appropriate location that fulfills an identified gap in demand in the local tourism market and has minimal landscape impact that will be mitigated. Yep, okay. There are no objections from roads, biodiversity, flooding, heritage or other external consultees such as SEPA, Transport Scotland or Nature Scot, except for the planning policy team who raised concerns purely on policy grounds. And in light of this, we request the committee reconsider the recommendation of the officer and instead move to grant planning permission today. Thank you.
Gentlemen, are you willing to take questions from members? Yep. You give it a moment for the chat box to be populated. Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Thank you for your presentation. When you were talking just now, Mr. Rankin, you didn't touch on the question of the land itself. One of the points raised here, one of the reasons was that it's prime agricultural land. You didn't mention that. I wonder if you had a comment on that. It does say, I'm reading from the report now, paragraph 51, it's NPF4 Policy 5, states the development proposed on prime agricultural land or land of lesser quality that is culturally or locally important or prime use, as identified, will only be supported where it's for essential infrastructure. So I just wonder if you had a comment on that. You never mentioned that at all.
Yeah, I mean, as mentioned, the land is prime agricultural land, but as I said, a not insignificant portion of the land is comprised of this brownfield element, and we feel that that would therefore have grounds to meet the definition of grey belt land, which can include the environs of brownfield sites as well.
Councillor Harvey.
Thanks. I just had a question. I did have a question about the land use, but it was partially answered there. But my question was about your economic development figures and the number of jobs created. How many permanent jobs will be created after this is finished if you are granted planning permission rather than just the construction jobs related to it? Thanks.
So I actually didn't touch on the construction stage jobs. The construction stage jobs that we estimate would be created on site are 24, and that's a full-time equivalent of 20 jobs. In terms of the jobs on site, as we said, 31. positions in total. You're quite right, some of those would be part-time, potentially seasonal, and we've calculated that at a full-time equivalency rate of 18 positions.
18.
Councillor
Okay.
Allen.
Okay.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Good morning, guys. Now, question first of all for Scott, and I've got 3 questions, but I'll ask Scott his first one. As was made out by Christian when he did the presentation, planning does not make it legally binding for community support. And in your presentation, you did say it was legally binding. Can you just clarify that for me, please?
Yeah, we have signed agreements with both community groups, signed by the company directors of Ancres and the chairpeople of both community groups.
Convener Massey.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. It's acknowledged that the main mode of transport associated with the development will be vehicle-based. Now, it says the proposal includes the provision of a pedestrian footpath. Now, the pedestrian footpath, I assume, is from the site into Auchterarder. How are you in control of the land that you need for this, or is this subject to negotiation with other landowners?
Yeah, the land that's required is only required from the highways, and the pavement links into the roundabout at Gleneagles Equestrian Centre, the new pavement that we'll be building, so that it does already exist in pavement there.
In other words, you need to have permission from the highways. It would be Perth and Kinross Council, I assume.
Yes, that's correct. At the same time as we'll be lodging our roads construction consent for a ghost lane, which will also slow down the traffic turning into our site.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Vice Convener. It's a site with 68 holiday homes, and you've suggested that nobody will be allowed to live there permanently. Is there a view that the site will be closed down, or how are you going to manage that properly? Thank you.
As part of the application, we've submitted an operational manual, so that we'll have part of that. We'll have an on-site manager. The on-site manager will be a full-time resident and the only full-time resident of the site. Through the deed of conditions and the titles of each property, there will be restricted access, and there will also be planning commission conditions from Perth and Kinross Council that will be able to police through that system as well. So it'll be a double-edged sword, actually a triple-edged sword.
Councillor Ellingworth.
Thank you. How many years, you said there's a legally binding agreement, how many years does that cover?
The initial payment to the bus group to support them for the extra days will commence in April next year, and will run and support the bus group for 4 years. And the sports hub, we are looking to be on site because we can only lay the particular mugga surface during the summer months, and we want to be on site by the summer because we only have a short window to deliver the actual surface. The perimeter fencing can be added later on, but we need to get the surface down in the summer.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, there's no further questions. You're free to go. Convener, there's no further deputation, so I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Can I ask members if they have any questions for officers? Any questions? Well, I'll start the questions then. As a follow-on to the question I asked, the deputation about the ownership of the land, and it was stated by the deputation that the ownership lies within Perth and Kinross Council, the highways. Has the developer or applicant spoken to the roads or planning about the footpath, the proposed footpath?
I'm not aware of any discussions in relation to that. I did ask various colleagues within various parts of the road service, and there doesn't seem to have been any discussions on that. We have looked at the situation along that road, and it would appear very difficult, if at all possible, to provide an adequate footpath along that route.
Carolyn, do you have any comment on that?
Good afternoon. No, so I'm not aware of any discussions in terms of the ownership, and as Christian has said, we would want to be able to confirm that the footway would be able to be delivered before we are able to agree a condition in that respect.
Thank you, Convener. Convener's allowed me to come in. It's Colin Elliott from Legal. Just to lead on from that, there is an issue. If members were considering grant, this issue, I think, would have to be sorted before you get to that. Any condition for a pavement has to be deliverable. That's one of the tests for a condition. And it is not clear at the moment. It is deliverable. From what I saw in the stills, you have to look at the width, if it's 1.8 pavement, etc. So on this occasion, if you were thinking of going for grant, I think actually you would need to defer for further information on the pavement, whether it could be conditioned and delivered.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Convener. If you'll just indulge me, I'm going over a few pages here. Page 78.7 and 11, it says there's no requirement for an environmental impact assessment. On page 83, it says an environmental assessment is not required. And then on page 87 at number 83, we're suggesting that economic impact is a material consideration and careful deliberation has been given. And I'm just trying to get a handle on, do we need an economic impact assessment, or do we not?
I'll try and answer that. So an economic impact assessment has been submitted and has been considered. And I think, as I set out in the report, that the limited economic benefits of this do not in any way outweigh the significant adverse impacts and non-compliance with policy as set out in the report, if that answers your question.
I'm just unsure why in 4 parts of the report it says we don't need one, and then at 63 we're suggesting we do.
I think the earlier paragraphs we were referring to relate to environmental impact assessments. Again, that is determined through legislation, and there are various tests and barriers in relation to that as to when that would be applicable. That was screened, and consideration was that an environmental impact assessment report was not required. But we have separate matters that to an extent are scoped out and information provided in relation to them, one of which is that economic impact assessment. So they're 2 separate things, although economic impact can be considered. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, Convener. Why are you uncomfortable with the landscaping arrangements?
I think, again, through the presentation, it's a arable, open, wide landscape with significant views for quite some distance in both directions. What we're proposing here is 6 to 8 buildings to be put into that open landscape with some trees around them, would significantly change the landscape. Landscape was one issue amongst many that we're not comfortable with, but I don't think anybody, well, certainly my view is there would be a significant change in the landscape from what it is at the minute, as well as loss of agricultural land and many, many other things to consider.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. My question is more of a technical question, and probably for Mr. Elliott, I'm afraid. You've partially answered it because you said that if we had and it's hypothetical, if you had a mind to grant, we would have to defer it. But we've still got 4 reasons here why it was refused. And if we were to grant subject to deferral, because we want to go, we're going to have to depart from policy. Now, I seem to recall in the past, there's obviously you have to justify why you're departing from policy. Could you just elaborate if that is that the case here?
Yes, I mean,
there's four reasons, obviously.
My earlier answer was focusing on the pavement, but you're absolutely correct. There's another exercise, or not exercise, there's another part to it, is if you are considering grant, the report is very clear about being contrary to policy. I appreciate the applicants say it's not. I would just point out if it's contrary in one part, and there's some policies can support it, others may not, but it still makes it contrary to the MPF4 and LDP. So in that case, given the report, it would still be for members to think, right, if I'm minded to grant, what are the justifications to grant it, contrary to the development plan? And Mr. Smith's outlined some of the considerations in the report. So yes, there is the extra exercise.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, the question I have is regarding the classification of the land as agricultural lands, and I know this is always a kind of hot potato, for want of a better phrase. I noticed the applicant made some comments about the land not being prime agricultural land. I wonder if you could kind of give your opinion on that matter. Thanks.
Thank you. I won't give you my opinion, but I'll just set out some of the facts, and I think it's covered, and I'm just scrolling down here to see the exact paragraph numbers. So if you go to the section, paragraph 52, which relates to policy 51, and what we're talking about here is good quality agricultural soils. It's not prime agricultural land. Prime agricultural land only relates to classes 1, 2 and 3.1, but this is very good quality agricultural soil, and again through the presentation you would have seen that it was laid to arable cropping, and again satellite imagery over a number of years demonstrates that it's been in use almost continuously for that purpose. There's also some comment made in relation to part of the site being brownfield. I think again, if you go back to the presentation, there is a small part of the overall site which has had some gravel or surfacing put on it in association to events at Gleneagle some time in the past, and again the imagery showed that that is regenerating itself, and we wouldn't consider that there was any necessity to redevelop the site to deal with any problem associated to that area that had been used some point in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, convener. I agree with the path and the points that have been made there, and if there's an opportunity to defer on that basis, then that might be the best way to go forward. However, the question I want to ask is, if the development was closer to Auchterarder, would it be acceptable?
I think again, as we maybe advise in previous committees and things, that we have a proposal in front of us. We've not considered any alternatives. We've got proposals before us which we feel is considerably contrary to the development plan for multiple reasons.
Perhaps another way of thinking about it, Councillor Allen, is another site is very site specific that has to be assessed in its own right. So it's quite a difficult question to answer that one. You have to concentrate on this application.
Thank you. Councillor Braun.
Yes, just coming back to something Mr. Smith mentioned about the hardcore or the gravel. Very roughly, do you know what the proportion of that is to the whole field? I mean, it's a ballpark figure might be, just to give an idea for the public.
Well, it might be helpful to go back to the aerial shot, so that the first image in the presentation, and then there's yeah, so if you look at that, and there's a line that travels north-south with an area of sort of lighter coloured red, and the middle bottom
left. So it's that part I would, again, I don't want anybody to quote me on this, but 6, 7, 8% of the site. But again, I would reiterate that is an area of rubble and gravel, which is regenerating itself and is not seen as being any particular issue in terms of having to be dealt with, whether it be contaminated or causing any amenity or visual issue. It's started to see plants grow on it, etc., etc. It's not a problem as far as we see, and not anything in terms of brownfield or grey land that would justify development.
It's well less than half, is obviously what was well less than a quarter.
Well less than half, yes.
Thank you. Any further questions? As there are no further questions, can I ask for a motion? Bailey Williamson. We have a seconder for that? I will second it. Councillor Illingworth, you can second it.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Do we have an
Convener,
amendment?
Convener, sorry, could you repeat the motion? I didn't hear it, and I don't know if Councillor James did either.
Okay. Bailey Williamson, repeat your motion.
Certainly. Yeah, my motion is to refuse the application, so following officer's recommendations.
Did you get that?
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Braun, you have an amendment.
Yes, I think I'm going to have to take Mr. Elliott's advice on this. My thought was whether to defer this for more further investigation on the path, as he's mentioned. But I'm conscious of the fact that we've still got the 4 reasons behind that. So I really want to take his advice on this. Part of me thinks we should defer it to get the full information before we make a decision. But I'm conscious of the fact that we're deferring. Still with the
Okay, then.
So I'm just saying that we should defer, but I'm conscious of the fact there's substantial.
We'll try and get a seconder for you first.
Okay, fine.
Okay. Can we have a seconder? Councillor Allen. Okay, I'm going to take 5 minutes just to have a discussion about this with Councillor Braun. Thank you.
I think, Convener, first of all, what I want to say is if there is a motion to defer for further information, we'll clarify the terms of that in a second, then that does not mean that you're granting the application. It is simply further information. But if it is deferred and it comes back to committee, you will still be faced with considering either refuse or grant. And if you're looking to grant at that stage, you will have to think about what considerations overrule the development plan. So, but I just want to tell, I mean, you mentioned deferring for, I kind of noted down it's further information. I think it would be on the deliverability of a pavement, I think from the site, I think it's towards Auchterarder. I know it comes down to kind of a junction. Would that cover the motion or is there anything else? So it's simply defer for that information.
We talked about we talked about a suite of conditions as well. Is that something?
Do you want to add that? Yeah. So it would be defer for further information on the deliverability of a pavement from the site towards Auchterarder and a list of possible conditions in the event planning permission may be granted.
That's fine, thank you.
I presume Councillor Allen is in support of that. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Do members have any comments on the report? No comments on the report. Can I ask Councillor Braun if he wishes to sum up?
Oh, that's fine, thank you.
And can I ask Bailey Williamson to sum up?
No, thank you. No.
Thank you. Then I'll hand over to Mr. Elliott to confirm the terms of the motion and the amendment.
Thank you, Convener. Just catching up. I think, first of all, the motion by Bailey Williamson, seconded by Councillor Illingworth, is to refuse, as outlined in the report of handling. The amendment by Councillor Braun, seconded by Councillor Allen, is to defer further information on the deliverability of pavement from the site towards Auchterarder, and also a list of possible conditions. So that's motion is refuse, amendment is defer.
Members, when I read out your name, if you can advise if you're voting for the motion or the amendment. Councillor Allen.
Amendment.
Councillor Braun.
Amendment.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Amendment.
Councillor Harvey. Councillor Illingworth.
Motion.
Councillor James.
Amendment.
Councillor Massey.
Motion.
Councillor McPherson.
Motion.
Bailey McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor Stewart.
Motion.
Bailey Williamson.
Motion.
We have 7 votes for the motion and 4 votes for the amendment, therefore the motion will carry.
Thank you for that. And for planning permission is refused. Thank you. We will now have an hour's lunch break. We'll come back here for 1:30.